I'm Sara Davison, best known as the divorce coach, and I'm here. I really want to give you as much value as possible today. I am a best-selling author. I've got 2 books, bestsellers. I have a podcast, and I am a survivor of domestic abuse as well. So I'm talking from experience, and I want to make sure that we give you as much value as possible today. Right, so welcome to how to understand breakup and divorce and the impact on the workplace, as well as how to spot the signs of domestic abuse. I am very passionate about this subject. It's something that's very, very close to my heart as a survivor. A lot of people say to me, Sarah, how did you get into this? Well, I'm going to tell you this story because it is quite unusual. But what I do is helping a lot of people around the world, and I'm really hoping that it can help your staff, your employees, your team, and maybe you too. If you are a survivor or you have been through a tough divorce, this is going to resonate and hit home. I want you to know that we do have support for you. We have online groups. So I am going to talk through some pretty difficult subjects today. Domestic abuse is not an easy topic. I will make it as easy as I possibly can. As a survivor, I know how tough it is. So I just want to put out there that if you guys are struggling at all, Marina, who's on, is going to put on our support groups. They're free for a week. So you can jump on tonight. If anything I've said or anything that you've thought about has triggered any reaction, please note there are groups you can go to. They are run by my accredited coaches. They are a safe place, and we're providing them for you guys free of charge for a week. If anything I say does trigger anything, obviously reach out to us. This is what we do, and it is really normal because it is a tough subject. So what I'm looking to do is to really give you as much value as possible today that you can take away and think about, do you need this, either personally or within your organization right now? This is something that since COVID, we have seen a huge rise in need for support for breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse. Some of you will know the divorce rate spiked after COVID by 20%. The reason for that was purely, as we all know, being stuck in confined space with your loved one sometimes puts a lot of pressure on relationships, and sometimes that breaks down, which is a real problem. So that is one of the challenges that we faced after COVID. What I have seen since is that divorce rate has come back, and we have it's decreased. But now what we're looking to do is, I'm sure with the financial crisis, a lot of people are not getting divorced at the moment, and that is then going to take off again as soon as the financial crush has eased a little bit. So this is an ongoing issue. It's not going away. It's something that we live with. It's something that we have to manage. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about the support that you can put in place to look after your employees. Right, I'm going to share my screen so I can go through some slides. And Marina's going to pop in the support group number just in case anybody needs it. Right, okay. I think a lot of people are on now, so let's go from the beginning. Okay, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat as we go. I want to make sure that we answer as many questions as we can. So just to introduce me a little bit, my name, as I said, is Sara. I'm known as the divorce coach. I am also the patron of the DASH charity, which is a domestic abuse charity. It stands for Domestic Abuse Stops Here. As a survivor, it's something that's very, very close to my heart. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into this, because obviously the divorce coach is not a job title you kind of dream of whilst you're at school, and it's definitely not something that is very normal. So about 16 years ago, I realized that my husband not only didn't want to be married to me, that he was madly in love with somebody else. Now, we had met when I was in my 30s. I was completely in love with him. I thought I'd met my soulmate. And this is something that I hear so much from so many of our clients, is that they thought it was so perfect. And we've been married for about 2 or 3 years. We had a global business together, an office in Sydney and an office in London as well, with almost nearly 200 staff. So when this came out, it hit me like a freight train. I literally found out overnight. The actual story of how I found out is in my book, Uncoupling, but it was quite shocking. I found out overnight that he was not only madly in love with somebody else, but he obviously didn't want to be married to me anymore. Our son was only 1 year old. And obviously we had a big business together. So I was juggling a career, and suddenly overnight, everything changed. It hit me like a freight train. I didn't see it coming. I was really struggling. And I did a lot of that ugly crying on the bathroom floor. I did a lot of calling my mum at 2 a.m., which is what a lot of people do. It's a very normal reaction and very devastating. And your employees who are dealing with this will totally resonate with it. And if any of you have been through it, then I know you'll be resonating with this too. It's a really tough time in your life. In fact, not many people know this, but divorce is known as the second most traumatic life experience we go through after death of a loved one. The second most traumatic life experience. And I think a lot of people don't realize it, especially if you haven't been through it. So it really does shake up your whole life. And for me, my entire life changed. Obviously, I lost my business partner, my husband, who I thought was my best friend. Not only was he madly in love, but I found out literally a few months later that she was pregnant. So everything came at once. It was a huge life change for me. Hit me like a freight train, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. Now, during that process, after all the ugly crying, I got to the point where at this stage in my life, I've been coaching for about 15 years. And I knew that even though this was really bad, that it didn't have to define me going forward. And actually, I was in Australia on Balmoral Beach, if anyone knows it. It's a beautiful beach just outside of Sydney. And it's a white beach with turquoise sea. And I was walking along there one day after being in the office for a little while. And I don't know if anyone's been through a breakup, but when your partner has cheated on you, what often happens, definitely happened in my situation, was that people were coming up to me saying, gosh, Sara, now that you know, let me tell you, I found out about 6 months before, and this is how I found out. Now, they were well-meaning and they wanted to help and support me, but actually each time it was like a dagger to the heart. So what I decided to do was I was going to then sit there on the beach and just cry my eyes out and take a bit of a break from the office. But as I was walking along and sitting there looking out at the sea, something very different happened. And actually, it was a really defining moment, which happens to everybody going through a breakup. So your employees will face this at some point. They have the chance to either step up and do something about it, or carry on as they're going, and this defines them as a grey cloud that follows them around. Now, at this point on the beach, I realized the pain was too much and I didn't want to tolerate that anymore. So I had the choice, and I decided in that moment to step up. And actually, that's when my motto, screw you, watch this, was born. But as I was catapulted into this divorce process, I tried to find help. And there was literally very little help out there, which is quite surprising, seeing as everybody on the planet goes through heartbreak at least once, right? Everyone. However, if you want to give up smoking or stop drinking or lose weight, there's thousands of groups and support you can go to, but there was nothing to help me specifically with what I was dealing with. Now, I tried therapy, but therapy is very different to coaching on what we do. What I needed was someone to say, Sara, this is what you need to do. Try this, do this. Let's put a plan together. Let's deep dive. Let me make suggestions. Let me help you. Let me explain what the future is going to look like here and what you're going to have to navigate and how it might impact your kids. How to maybe choose a lawyer or to dial down some of these controlling negative emotions so you can change how you feel in a heartbeat. Now, as a coach, I knew that was possible, but I needed someone to step in and help. So therapy didn't really help me, which is why I created the tools that were in my first book, Uncoupling, and then literally defined my work moving forward. The Daily Mail got hold of the retreats I was running and dubbed me the divorce coach, and it's kind of taken off since then. So that pain to power journey is something that's very important to me. I set up a coach training school in 2018, and we've now trained over 650 coaches in 27 different countries around the world to support people going through any kind of breakup, divorce, including domestic abuse. So let's look a little bit at why relationships end, because I think if you're going to be dealing with people in your teams who are struggling with this, we need to be able to what I call shoe shift and understand some of the things that might be going on for them. Now, there's a whole list, as you can see here: adultery, abuse, incompatibility. But ultimately, my belief, and I was talking about this on TV the other day, is that the main reason why relationships break down, underpinning that, is a lack of communication. A lack of communication can be going on for a very long time. And it could be that you have different ways of resolving conflict. Maybe one of you likes to talk it out, but the other one maybe doesn't so much. And so things get sort of pushed away or shoved under the carpet. And then over a period of time, things build up. That resentment starts to build up. And then that intimacy starts to break down. And then if intimacy starts to break down, all sorts of other things, ripple effects can happen. Now, it's not excusing any bad behavior, but a lot of it, if you boil it back down, comes down to lack of communication. But the impact of breakup and divorce is very wide reaching. It's not just the relationship. A lot of people will say, well, you're going through a divorce, but everything else seems to be okay. It's impossible for everything else to be okay, because it's what I call the ripple effect, where one thing happens and it kind of spreads across your entire life. It will obviously impact your ability to work. It will impact your mental health. It will potentially impact your physical health, because you won't be sleeping, you'll be worrying, you'll be carrying a lot more stress. If it's not dealt with over a longer period of time, it can lead to some quite debilitating health issues as well. What we also see is it impacts your ability to maintain friendships, to be able to maintain weight. Some people eat a lot, some people stop eating completely. Coping mechanisms, again, they are other things that people turn to almost eat their feelings, if you like. So, for example, some people will drink more because it numbs the pain. Some people will cry. Some people will isolate themselves. Some people will have what looks like relatively healthy coping mechanisms. So, for example, maybe they're going to the gym, maybe they're working all hours. Maybe you see them coming in extra early. Maybe they don't want to go home, so they're staying late in the office. Now, whilst that might appear to be healthy, again, if there's unresolved issues, that is going to cause a lot of challenges for people in the long run. So this impact is also on parenting, the ability to look after their kids, other relationships. So lots and lots of things will begin to break down. Some people will stuff their emotions down and not face them, and other people will uncontrollably be dealing with these. And the interesting thing with breakup and divorce is that it's not, everyone reacts differently. It very much depends on on the personality, on the ability to deal with stress. We all have friends who can cope with a lot of stress, and we all have work colleagues and friends who just can't deal with any stress. So again, it's looking at the individual, it's looking at also the impact of that life change on their financial situation as well, their lifestyle. Do they have a support system or don't they? Many people don't have a support system outside of that partnership. So that means they are very much isolated. And with the changes that come, which will include moving home potentially, maybe they're downsizing, maybe they're going to really struggle financially, childcare changes as well, maybe they're not going to have any help, or maybe they won't see their kids as much. Again, there's so many different moving parts with this. We have to be aware that it's not the same situation for everyone. And just because someone coped okay with it, somebody else may be falling apart with it. So again, it's very different. And also the support for each individual, therefore, will need to be tailored and be different. So let's look at the difference between a healthy relationship and a toxic relationship. I wonder if you think that everyone knows if they're in a toxic relationship or not, because most people will assume that if you're in a toxic relationship, you'll know about it. But unfortunately, that is not the case. It certainly wasn't the case with me. Now, don't get me wrong. I knew there were things that weren't great, but I always believed that maybe it was partly to do with me. It was my fault because I wasn't great at certain things, purely because I was being told that as well. It reinforced those beliefs. So a lot of people won't know they're in a toxic or abusive relationship. So how can you tell? Well, when you're going through a breakup with somebody and it's a healthy relationship. Now, healthy doesn't mean, by the way, that there's no conflict. Absolutely not. It is healthy to have some conflict. So you will see the loveliest, kindest, most healthy relationship dynamics when they go through a separation. There will be conflict over who gets the piano, who spends time with the dog at the weekend, where the kids go. That's going to cause some problems there with people dealing with those different challenges that come up, because it is difficult, it's uncomfortable. But the difference is everybody wants to work around a compromise, a fair resolution to the breakup. Whether it's a healthy relationship, will be focused on compromise. However, when we're looking at toxic relationships, that one party may want to be compromising, coming to a fair resolution, but the other will be focused on total annihilation. Total annihilation. So what do I mean by that? I mean, there is no compromise. There is no, let's try and work it out and let's make sure everyone's okay. It's also about causing maximum pain and suffering throughout the process. And unfortunately, the divorce process and the family court system, not just in the UK, around the world, but we're talking about the UK here on the whole, is really not fit for purpose for victims of abuse. This is something I campaign at government level about. I'm a founding member of many groups, and SHERA, which is a really pioneering domestic abuse support network for victims we're campaigning to make changes at government level. Very much involved in looking how we can change that. It's difficult from the outside, but from the inside, we're working with people who are keen to make changes. But if you have an employee who is being dragged through the family courts during a toxic relationship breakdown, there are going to be a lot of challenges they're facing, which really need a lot of support. Let's talk a little bit about what is abuse as well, because we used to call it domestic violence. I'm sure a lot of you heard that term. Now in the UK, we call it domestic abuse because it covers not just physical violence. In fact, quite a lot of the cases that we work with, me and my coach and my team, are more coercive control, which is, obviously illegal now since 2015, I think it was, the law changed. But coercive control, emotional control, psychological control, financial control, economic control. So that could be controlling what people are spending, what they're, limiting their access to finances. And again, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone. I didn't think that abuse happened to people like me. I mean, I'm educated. I didn't think I was stupid, but actually the situation that I found myself in was horrific. A lot of people will say, why did you stay when you found out? It's very difficult to get out of an abusive situation. We're going to talk about that. How can you spot the signs? If it's personally you in a relationship, there are signs. It's very hard to spot from the outside because as survivors, we're very good at covering it up because it's embarrassing. We don't want people to know. Maybe we don't even know ourselves, right? But how to spot the signs of a toxic relationship? Number one, gaslighting. That's confusing behavior. It's leading people to believe things are a certain way when they're not. It is really designed to make people feel confused so they stop trusting themselves. It's debilitating. So it could be that their experience, say, of a night out, where they come home, they're talking about it, and the abusive partner will say, well, that didn't happen that way. Or if you had an argument, you'll be blamed for something that maybe you didn't do. Or just small put downs over a period of time that are confusing, that lead you to stop trusting your own instinct, because that enables them to get more control over you. Obviously, lies, a lot of lies. I often say if their lips are moving or their fingers are typing, it's going to be a lie. Everything is part of a manipulation to get something they want. Now, remember, abuse doesn't have to be nasty all the time. Abusive behavior can be being super charming, can be being very charismatic. And again, it's a male and female. It happens, you can have abusers that are male and female. The research shows quite strongly that it is more a female, that females that are victims, but it definitely happens to men. And we support a lot of men because we are coaches. And I think men prefer to have a coach rather than a therapist, especially through things like this. A slow erosion of confidence is definitely over a long period of time. It doesn't happen on day one. Living a double life, quite often the victim may seem very okay to a lot of people outside, but behind closed doors, things are very different. I'm going to come on and show you as an employer or as a teammate how you can spot the signs of abuse, because this is something very specialist that is hard to see. Obviously, emotional abuse, controlling behavior, verbal abuse, names. Now, again, it doesn't have to be outwardly a very aggressive name. I had a client the other day whose partner kept saying to her, oh, it's so great that you wear that dress because, even with your chubby arms, you still have the confidence to wear it. I love it. I love that. Now that, she told me, was a compliment, but actually we can see that is that's not a compliment. That's a backhanded insult, but dressed up to make her feel that he was being very sweet and supportive of her, but actually he wasn't. And it was chipping away at her confidence, and she stopped wearing those dresses, which didn't have sleeves, by the way. She stopped wearing them. So it was working on her, but done in a way where she wasn't quite sure it was abuse because he was being really nice and supportive, right? Lack of personal freedom comes where they start to control and isolate you. Why do they want to isolate you? Because they want to increase their control over you. And by having you isolated from, say, maybe friends or family or work colleagues, that means that they have more control. Now, that will be them putting on boundaries, but it will be slow. It might be at the beginning, it's great, they're very social, but then they might start to impose things or make the victim feel very uncomfortable about spending time with somebody else. Like one of the campaigners I worked with, she was a hairdresser in a salon with men and women coming in as customers. She was only allowed, for the entire time she was there, for the 15 years she was there, to cut women's hair. And that was just the thing. She was not allowed to cut men's hair. So, these sort of rules are imposed, and these are the sort of things over a period of time we adapt to. It could be, oh yeah, if you want to go and see your mum and dad, but wouldn't you rather spend the time with me? And then it could be, oh, actually, you know what? I don't want to go and see your mum and dad. And then it could be, your mum and dad are awful. Why do you even speak to them? But this is over a period of time. They don't show up on day one as they are on the last day, that's for sure, because we wouldn't get into those relationships that way. It is a slow and gradual erosion of self-esteem taking control. And walking on eggshells is something where they'll be nervous. They'll be nervous to talk about things. They'll be nervous about voicing what they truly feel, because if they do, they know there'll be consequences. So they're always thinking, what is the reaction going to be to whatever I'm about to say or do? So that the abuser then has, so they're trying to work out what the abuser is going to say and do to protect themselves from any repercussions. The important thing to know is that if you are struggling with abuse, it is not your fault. And I really want you to hear that. If you're struggling with it at the moment, or if you've got employees that are dealing with it, it is not their fault. Whilst some of our behaviours, being highly empathetic, that's how we get into these relationships, may enable abuse to continue or accelerate, it is not the fault of the victim. This is a very calculated process that victims will be subjected to over a gradual period of time. In order to be in a relationship with an abuser, you have to be highly empathetic. You probably don't like conflict. You're probably an avoider of conflict. You probably are a bit of a people fixer. You feel like you can help people, and you always see the good, right? Because you're like, oh, well, they're having a bad day. Oh, well, it hasn't gone well for them today, so therefore this is why this is happening. So it's not your fault is a really key message. And actually, the first time most victims hear that, it is a huge emotional statement for somebody to hear, because it hits hard and it hits different if you're a victim. So how can you signpost and safeguard? Well, there's lots of different things that you can do, but actually just being there and listening is key. What we don't want to do is start unpacking and talking about things that may cause some kind of trauma response. So watching and being there, being supportive, and creating a safe space for them to come to you is important. Obviously, if it's life-threatening, it's 911. If it is something that they're reporting, then obviously there are support services that can help people. So 999 for emergencies, but their local domestic abuse charity to where they live, not to where the office is, but to where they live, will be able to, first of all, do a risk assessment with them, which is really important. And that will basically work out, what services they need to be connected to in their local area. So whether that's police on their or fire brigade, because there is a lot of firebombing through letterboxes and things like that, unfortunately. I was at a talk with a fire brigade locally the other day, and it's absolutely shocking. But the fire brigade have obviously adapted to this. They have fireproof, fire resistant letterboxes that they can install. So if they're connected to their local domestic abuse charity, they can get real specialist help to help them find the help they need in their area, which will keep them safe. It will also, for social services, get them connected as well. Now, the important thing to know here is that we don't really want to be calling the emergency services on their behalf, because you don't know what that's going to trigger. It's very difficult to phone a domestic charity for somebody. They will have to do it themselves. The best thing you can do in the first instances is just to listen, create a safe space, as long as they're safe, obviously, and then advise them, recommend them, suggest to them that they reach out to their local domestic abuse charity. You can also, maybe do some research in their local area and find a couple for them to call. Women's Aid are nationwide. The Dash charity that I'm the patron of, we're local to Windsor, Maidenhead and Slough. There are lots of little, small charities like that underneath the Women's Aid banner as well. There's a national domestic abuse hotline, and also there's specialist numbers for men as well, like the Mankind. initiative. A lot less support for men, unfortunately, but these are frontline services. What we offer as coaches, we are not frontline. Although our services, if you use them, will be able to direct you on what to say and what to do in these circumstances too. So let's have a look at we talked a little bit about the ripple effects of the breakup, but how do breakups impact you in the workplace? Well, actually, it's quite shocking. I'm part of the Parents Promise group, and I'm not sure if you saw this, but 2 years ago, I think it'd be 2 years ago in January, we launched in Parliament an initiative to raise awareness of just the huge impact that corporates, businesses, organizations are dealing with if their staff are going through a separation or a divorce. 90% said that it affected their ability to work. 95% said that separation impacted their mental health in the workplace. Those of you that have been through it, you'll know there's a million things going on in your head. It's very difficult to focus. Obviously, 74% worked less well or less efficiently. 39% took time off work, and 12% of people dealing with a separation stopped working altogether. Now, only 9%, this was 2 years ago, said that their employees had a specific policy for separation as well. Harvard Business Journal did some really interesting research as well, relatively recently. I think this is about 18 months ago. And they said that they found that a separation or a divorce, so it's not just a divorce, reduces your employee productivity by up to 40% for a period of 3 years. Now that's interesting because it's the year as the relationship falls apart, the research showed. It's the year of the divorce or the actual moving apart. And then it's the year after that when they're getting used to the differences in lifestyle. Maybe it's the childcare arrangements. Maybe they're moving home. I mean, you know how stressful moving home can be. So again, all these things come with the divorce. Now, the interesting thing is it wasn't just the employee that was struggling then, because most people will go into the workplace, they'll have a reduced energy level, their work will be affected. So it also reduces co-workers' productivity by 4% and their line managers by 2.5%. Again, 23% of workers took time off sick or unpaid leave. Again, not great for businesses. And in 2021, UK employees seeking separation and divorce advice was up 73% year on year. So this is what we're seeing over the last 4 or 5 years. There's been many more requests and calls for support about this particular topic. And even for 1 in 10, it resulted in them leaving the workplace completely. So what can you do in the workplace if you are struggling with a breakup and you find it hard to go in, you have less brain space available to focus, maybe you've got a shorter fuse, maybe you're finding it hard to deal with those negative emotions. Now, this is what happens. This is what you'll see if you've got people in your team going through it or you've been through it yourself. It's hard to focus on the job at hand. It's hard to lead or motivate your team. It's very often that people will make mistakes. And they'll get distracted. Some people will overwork, which again leads to burnout. So again, very difficult things. So some of the things that we work with our clients who are still in the workplace are to try and set up so that obviously they can go into work. Now, our coaching is fast, positive transformations. That's what we're about. It's not therapy that takes a long time. We come up with specific strategies that will enable people in the workplace to increase their productivity because we're helping them deal with the negative emotions outside. So we're showing them tools to dial down negative emotions. We're showing them how to change how they feel in a heartbeat. So they might feel overwhelmed, but we'll give them tools that can snap them out of that very quickly and ways that they can get into the office rather than taking time off sick or not being productive. So lots of things that we can work with on them. Some of them are obviously scheduling in regular breaks, understanding their trigger points, things that will make them worse. So for example, it could be that they have a stressful meeting and that might trigger. We've seen that quite a lot with clients who work in quite busy environments where they're going from meeting to meeting. Having a safe space allocated. So if they are feeling a bit overwhelmed, they know to remove themselves and they're very aware emotionally on when those emotions start to rise, when they need to take a break. Also working around flexible hours, if that's possible. It's not always possible, but having that discussion where they can work out, actually now my childcare arrangements have changed. I may need to be flexible here. I may need to have some flexible working hours, and how to have those discussions and be able to have those discussions with staff. These are things they'll need. Their childcare arrangements will be changing. They will need time for paperwork if they're going through a court case, and days to go to court. And these are all things that we can work with you on. Like, would you like to give them, do they have to take holiday, for example, to go to court? Some companies are looking now at maybe shifting that around so they don't. So again, looking at different ways that you can support people in the workplace to help them with this. Now, how does domestic abuse affect your business? Well, some of these are pretty hard-hitting stats. 21% of full-time employees have experienced domestic abuse. That's a lot. 21% of your full-time employees will have experienced domestic abuse. Now, 74% of them will have suffered harassment at the workplace through their abuser. And over 1 in 10 report that the abuse continues in the workplace. And a lot of the time it's through abusive emails or phone calls. So they don't have to be with the abuser to be being abused. Obviously, it costs businesses a lot of money, £14 billion lost to businesses each year through decreased productivity, time off work, lost wages, and sick pay as a result of domestic abuse. And 47% of those experiencing domestic abuse said their perpetrator turned up at their workplace or stalked them outside of their place of work. Now, there was a recent case that you may have seen in the news where an employee left her office, went downstairs, and was attacked by her abuser who was waiting for her in the car park. So domestic abuse does happen, and it happens to everybody. Now, how it impacts your employees. Nearly 9 out of 10 workers said it impacted their performance. And over half of those experiencing domestic abuse had to take time off. So the time off is going up, the ability to work is going down. Interestingly, 1 in 50 women lose their jobs as a consequence of domestic abuse. Over a quarter of colleagues have been threatened or harmed by a colleague's abuser. So it's not just restricted to that particular, to the victim, it's also the people around them, because the control can get quite aggressive in some cases. I've seen it where one of my clients, she worked in a very male-dominated office, and some of the men at an event were confronted by their partner, her abuser, because they were insisting that there was something going on between them. So again, there are very often consequences on the rest of the office. So 90% of those experiencing domestic abuse said it created conflict and tension with their colleagues. So again, it's interesting, isn't it, that this isn't just the employee you're dealing with, it is the team as well that can also be affected. So this is the bit that everybody asks me, how can you spot the signs of domestic abuse in your employees? Because a lot of it happens behind closed doors, and a lot of us don't want to talk about it. It's embarrassing. There's a stigma still attached to it. It is a difficult thing to talk about. And, obviously, could there be the worry also that it will impact the way you think about them? Because it is quite humiliating when you sit back and think about what is happening. So what are the signs that a colleague is in an abusive relationship? Okay, so here are some of the things you might, depending on how close you are with this particular employee, or their colleagues might notice, maybe if you're not as close, but walking on eggshells with their partner. So maybe you're not meeting them. Maybe this partner never comes to events, or maybe when they do show up, your colleague is acting very different around them. Okay, that's quite often they change their behavior when that person's in the room. Again, remember, they're walking on eggshells all the time. They're going to be worried about what people might say, what they might learn, and anything can trigger off a reaction. And maybe that won't happen there. It will happen after the event behind closed doors. Most likely it will. So again, they're nervous. They might be feeling confused by their partner's behavior. Again, the gaslighting, and I put rabbit holes in here. It's basically where they throw what I call a grenade into a situation. So like maybe say something that's a little bit provocative or controversial, and then people then chase after that, try to say, well, why are they saying that? And why is that happening? And did that happen that way? And again, it leads people down a rabbit warren of different directions, which take away from what they're supposed to be doing and focusing on. Erosion of self-confidence and self-esteem. You might see over a period of time, your employee starts to withdraw, starts to increase their self-doubt, and ability to make their own decisions. So again, as I said, this is a continuous thing. They might start to be isolated as well. If you didn't notice that at the beginning, over a period of time, you might see that they withdraw more and more. Maybe they're not coming out as much. Maybe they never did if the relationship's been going on for a long time when they started working with you. But isolation is a key tool to abuse for controlling somebody. So maybe they're not ever allowed to attend social events. Now, they're not going to tell you they're not allowed, though. So again, this is very difficult to spot. But again, if you know the person, if you're close to them, you might be able to see these signs. Very often, they lead a double life. What's going on behind closed doors is very different from the outside. They may look like the perfect couple. They may not have full financial control as well, so lack of financial independence, being nervous about spending money. Again, these signs on their own are not definite signs that they are in an abusive relationships, but these are things that may raise now, hopefully, a red flag with you to think, do I need to question this, or is there something potentially here? A lack of personal freedom. Now, they have to run everything past their partner because of the controlling behavior. They can be very scared of making decisions outside of their partner's approval. Negative self-talk, because that's what they're getting at home. And maybe their boundaries of what they tolerate are very low. So you find that they tolerate unacceptable behavior to what might be other people unacceptable behavior, but to them, those boundaries have been eroded so low that that is just normal behavior. So again, these are some of them. There's also others that maybe, I had a call from an HR company the other day, and they had someone call their hotline saying, look, this member of staff is showing up late to work, and she's getting reprimanded in the office, and she's really nervous because her husband is taking her car keys to make her late. He's hiding them. He's also damaged her laptop, so it's not working properly, and sometimes he takes it completely. So she's making excuses that she can't come in today or she needs to work from home, but she's getting in trouble because they're seeing her as someone that shows up late, she's unreliable, she damages work property, but actually she doesn't want to say, I'm in an abusive relationship, but that's what's going on for her. So you can see there can be things that are going on that we misread because we're not looking or educated enough to understand on domestic abuse that these are signs. People turning up late to work may be because their partner's doing something that makes them late. So again, there's all sorts of things that could be contributing, but obviously someone being late on a regular basis isn't a guarantee that that is a domestic abuse. So again, this is why it's so hard to spot. But if you know them well, you might notice that they do change their appearance to please their partner. Maybe they have lost interest in the things that they were passionate about before, that they are nervous or act awkwardly or differently around their partner, that their partner often causes very awkward situations for them or embarrassing situations, maybe put downs, things that you watch think, oh, that wasn't very nice, that made her feel uncomfortable, or him, obviously. Quite often they take the blame as well for their partner's unacceptable behaviors or try to sort of laugh it off, smooth it over so it doesn't escalate. Maybe they mention that their partner has quite big mood swings. That's quite rare in my experience, but if they do start to talk about it, that might be something they mention. Are they needing to let their partner know where they are at all times, or are they being tracked as well? Very often they will be being tracked. That's a very common thing. Whether you know that or not, I don't know. But again, if you do realize that's definitely a controlling behavior, right? Do they have restrictions on who they can speak to, what they can wear, and what they spend? Are they hyper vigilant with their children? Now, this is a really interesting one, and one that makes me quite angry when I'm in Parliament, because quite often in court cases, victims of abuse are accused of being overprotective, or even, I've heard, over-bonded with their children. Now, why might that be? If you are parenting with an abuser, you are going to be worried about your child spending time there, or your child may be nervous about spending time there. So again, that might often, to the layman's eye, seem hypervigilant, over-vigilant, too much, neurotic, controlling. But actually, if you're worried about your child's safety, then that's a very normal, healthy reaction as a loving parent. And obviously, if you notice any sort of injuries, that can be a sign as well. But they're usually very good at hiding those. So they wear long sleeves all the time or high necks, even if the weather's hot, you know, might cover up a lot. So those sort of things are telltale signs. So how do we help? Because I'd love to explain a little bit about what we do. So there is support now. Like, we really are the new kid on the block, I guess, with employee benefits at the moment. We provide a lot of support for businesses now. We were always working. We've been doing this for, you know, well, I've been coaching for 3 decades. I know it's a long time, but specializing in the consumer market until about 2 years ago, when businesses started to come to us and ask for support and help on this, because there are issues here and they do impact, obviously, employee well-being and business bottom line. So it makes sense to put some processes in place that can support people. We are the only global providers of breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse coaching support. And I know that because we work with the government. They had to put it out to tender, and they came back to us and said, there's nobody else doing this, Sara. And that's because it's something that wasn't there before I created it. So I have an international team of accredited breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse coaches who are all trained by me. We offer lots of different solutions to suit every single type of business, whether you're small, whether you're big, to work with any budget, okay? We want to make this available to people, so we have very different entry levels depending on what you want to provide for your team. We have online support groups. The online support groups are available for people to come on. So if anyone today is struggling with that, you can do that too. But we have online support groups, which are run by my accredited coaches. Now, do you remember that I said that one of the big issues with abuse is isolation? Well, isolation is very common. So these online groups give them an instant support team. They find their tribe, they find their security and space with these people. So they're run by my coaches. There are 8 hours of online group coaching a week. It's online, so they can access from anywhere. We also offer one-to-one coaching, which is tailored to help them fast track. So we put a plan together to help that particular individual navigate those very different scenarios that I mentioned. Everyone is different. Everyone has different situations. We're all trained in this specialist area to help them through any of the breakup, divorce, or domestic abuse areas. We have a coaching hub, which is a tech platform any of your employees can access anonymously as well. So they get anonymous access to some of my books, my videos, the TV interviews I've done. So they get a Q&A, they can get all their questions answered on there anyway. But then if they decide they want to join the groups for the extra support, or even they want the one-to-one coaching sessions, we offer that too. We also do training for HR teams as well. I'm training about 400 government officials next week. And we have an accreditation, which is to become a breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse companion within the workplace. So again, that training will give you the logo to put on your website to show that you are supportive in that area for your team. And I do a lot of domestic abuse trainings and workshops as well. One of the benefits is that employees really love it. They love the support that we offer. And obviously you can connect with us through our website, saradavison.com. You can email me personally, sara@saradavison.com. I would love to have a personal chat with any of you guys if you are interested in finding out more. I am very passionate about this topic, as you can tell, and I've dedicated my life to helping people to cope better. Nobody needs to feel alone. There are a lot of tools and techniques that will fast track and rehabilitate your team to get them back in there emotionally, being more empowered to cope. And the tools that we teach will enable them to take their control back. They're self-empowerment tools designed for survivors of abuse, but also anyone going through any kind of breakup and separation, to dial down the heartbreak, to manage the conflict, to deal with affairs, to be able to put that to one side so they can come into the workplace. They have coping tools and mechanisms to enable them to be able to focus when they need to focus and be able to deal with the difficult stuff when they need to deal with that as well. Now, we work very quickly with teams. They don't need to sign up for years and years. In one session, we can make a massive positive difference to their ability to cope, their ability to navigate a difficult situation. So I think again, every business is different. We work with some very small businesses a chocolate factory and insurance companies. We work with Dell, Regatta, we work with the government. We were just started working with Volvo recently. This is something that is front and center right now because it is a growing need. And when we get out of the financial crisis we're in at the moment, the cost of living crisis, we will see this accelerate as well. A lot of people are not getting separated right now because financially it's very difficult. But what that means is they're struggling with relationships behind closed doors. And what that also means is that domestic abuse happens when people are trapped, just like it did in COVID. So we're seeing a lot of different situations with people where they're accessing us through the anonymous platform. You will be able to see, by the way, how many of your staff are coming onto the platform, how many of them are signing up for the online groups, how many of them are taking the one-to-one sessions, but it's anonymous, so you won't know exactly who. And what we find is that really increases the interaction with staff, with the team, because they can come on, whether they're male, female, whatever, they can come on, they can really access the information and get someone that really needs their help. So I've thank you. Please put all your questions, because now this is my chance to answer your questions. I wanted to just tell you one of the things that I spoke at the HR conference last year. I've spoken to quite a few of them recently, actually, because it's kind of the new topic, domestic abuse, for these conferences. And one of the HR directors stood up. She said, "Sara, can you help me?" She said, "I've got a guy in my office who's a manager level, and he's been going through a divorce for 9 months. His wife said she was leaving. And every morning he comes into my office," she's HR, "and he brings me a coffee and we start the day off with a little chat," she said. "And the thing is, these chats are like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. She said, "I don't mind. I like supporting him. And he tells me the latest thing that's been happening in the divorce process." Because remember, divorce processes can be anything from minimum 6 months to 4 or 5. And I was speaking to someone the other day in Ireland, it was going on for about 9 years. So it can take a long time, right? And she said, he comes in every morning and I want to support him. I want to help him. But actually what I'm finding is that he then leaves my office and I watch him working his way around everybody else's desk, and I can just feel the energy falling in the room. She goes, "And I'm happy to support him. That's not my problem. My question is, when is he going to start to be okay so he doesn't need all this extra support and it's not impacting on the whole team that I'm trying to manage?" And it's a really good question. And this is where we can really help, because one, he's having to talk to them because they're his support network, right? And that's really common. But actually, by having someone independent outside of the work environment, this can really fast track that. But the answer to her question is, if you are in HR and you have people coming to you with this, obviously you want to be empathetic, you want to be reassuring, you want to help people. However, there is a point where you are enabling them to stay stuck. And I know that sounds harsh, but you are enabling them to stay stuck if you're enabling them to talk to you and just relive that pain and the latest episode of what's going on in the divorce, right? Because it'll be like EastEnders every time you see them. Now, as a supporter and someone that wants to help them, the best way to support someone after a certain period of time when they're through the grieving process, and at 9 months he was well and truly through that, right? But he wanted love and connection, because that's the number one human need we all have. Love and connection. We all want that. We all strive for that. We'll do anything to have that. We'll compromise our morals and our values. That's why people have affairs, because love and connection is the number one human need. I'm not saying it's okay, but that's why things like that happen. So if he's lost his love and connection, which he had obviously with his wife, he's now getting that in empathy and support from the team around him in the office. So he's still getting his love and connection from a different source, right? So that's very normal human behavior. But if you're in HR, you can see the negative repercussions of this, which this lady could, which was the point of her question. So at some point, we have to shift that conversation to future pacing him to, okay, what's your plan? What are you going to do differently? And how can we support you in moving forward? So we're not going to focus on the past or what's happening now, but let's put a plan together on all the things you can do now that are going to help you move forward. And let's just touch base very briefly in the mornings on what you're doing that's positively impacting that future plan and moving forward, creating that vision. People cannot move forward if they don't know what they're moving towards. It's impossible. You can't move towards something that you don't know what it is. So as coaches, part of our work is the future either looks like mostly one of two things, either a blank canvas or a black hole. So what we want to do is throw as much color on that canvas or shine a light into that black hole for our clients. And again, if you're working with employees, let's shift their focus to the future as much as we can so that we can connect with them and support them on something positive rather than something that's draining. And then encourage them to only talk about that plan rather than the negative side. And again, when people get to that point, that's a welcome shift quite often. So these are the sort of things we help with. Do you only deal, Helen's asking, do you only deal with domestic abuse based around marriages and partner relationships? We have some people who are dealing with domestic abuse. Yeah, the coping mechanisms are very similar. I've created what I call the gameplay checklist, which is proprietary to me, which obviously I've trained all my coaches on, which is basically understanding what abuse is and how it works. It's the same for any kind of abuse, to be honest, and it is really empowering. So we can definitely work with people who are dealing with different types of abuse because it's the same strategies. So we have to understand whether we like it or not. If you're a survivor, you're a victim, you're in a game. And the perpetrator will be playing that game and moving you around the board like a pawn, unless you become aware of it. The way to deal with it is to learn the rules of the game, master them, and then always be 2 steps ahead. And there's some similarities there which we can definitely support people on. So it doesn't have to be a relationship breakdown, although that's kind of where most of our clients do come from. But what we do is working with victims of abuse. So we work with lots of different types of people. Do you have any resources around sexual harassment in the workplace? That's not really my bag. I'm very big on staying in my lane. So sexual harassment in the workplace isn't really something that we cover in any depth. Any advice for spotting the signs of abuse where employees are being managed remotely and people aren't always in the office together? I mean, it's the same things, but it is hard. It's hard if someone's working with you every day to spot the signs. People didn't know about me. You become very good at hiding things and very secretive. But there are signs, and as we've gone through I'm going to send you the recording of this, that there are signs you will see, and they will come across on Zoom as well in some cases. But again, what I would advise is that you create a space where maybe you should, like, for example, quite often I'll go into a company and I'll do a webinar for an hour and we'll cover similar things I've talked about with you. And what that will do will open a discussion. So, it's just about raising awareness of domestic abuse and telling people what it is. At that point, quite often we find that people then start to reach out and say, actually, I am dealing with this. Whether they come direct or they go straight into our hub and start using it for that, it depends. But actually, just by raising awareness, that's the best way for people then to give them the opportunity that, one, you understand, you're aware of it, you're educating. Clarity gives people power. By having the shift that actually I am in an abusive relationship, that's when they can start to understand what they're dealing with. And then, as I said, learn the rules of the game. And that's where they can start to take their power back. You can take your power back. You don't have to be suffering from abuse as a victim. You can turn it around. My 3rd book that's coming out soon is called Screw You, Watch This. And it's all about, okay, this is my chance. I refuse to let you break me any more than you already have, right? And now I'm going to turn this around. It's definitely possible after abuse to go on, be stronger, happier, more confident, but you need to know the tools to be able to do that. And it doesn't take as long as people think. That's what we're good at. We're good at fast tracking heartbreak. I mean, we've got some great tools to dial heartbreak down pretty quick, instantly for some clients, to be honest. But also how to change your state. It's all life skills that they can use in challenging situations, but with abusers, that can take a little bit longer. But the clarity is the first part we focus on, because clarity gives you power that enables you to then start to shift the focus, learn the tools, and then move forward. But we have to do it in a safe way. 30% of domestic homicides happen within 3 months of separation, which is why you need specialist people around you. That's why I'm suggesting you don't dive in and start talking about it with people. You can signpost them to their local domestic abuse charity. But actually, to start peeling the lid back and dealing with that, you need people that can really deal with that fallout, because 30% of domestic homicides happen within 3 months of separation. But what I think is more chilling is that 80% of those homicides, there was never any physical violence before. Never any physical violence before they were murdered. So a lot of clients will say to me, oh, it's okay, I'm going to go back and see them and have a chat about what we're going to do next, because they never hurt me, I'm not scared of that. But as they pull away, the need for control increases, and that's where behaviours can really shift from coercive control and emotional abuse to actual violence and murder. Sorry, it's not very upbeat, I know, but this is why this is so important for your team. Okay. So I would be very happy for those of you that would like to know more how we can tailor this to your business, how it all works. I would love to have Zoom calls with you. You can have them with me personally, not my team. I'm so passionate about this. I talk about it, I've written about it. My Instagram, I talk about it every day, giving top tips and support for people. The support groups I set up help and save lives every single day. The work we do is really rewarding because it's everything I wish I'd had, to be honest, when I was coming out of my relationship. And I think it's super empowering that we have these tools available now. And my mission is to help as many people as possible get access to those tools and have the support from survivors. Most of my coaches are survivors, not all of them, but most of them have been through really tough situations. So we have the empathy, we have the understanding. And we also are very well connected to all the support systems that they might need, whether it's specialist lawyers, financial advisors, anything they might need, any holistic healing as well. A lot of trauma is trapped in the body. It's not for everyone, but for some people, it's a game changer. So again, this is something that we are immersed in. As I said, this is what as a survivor and as someone that's brought a child up in this environment, we do a lot of work with empowering our clients to help their kids through this and for it not to damage them. Interestingly, having two healthy parents isn't always the best dynamic for kids. I know it's quite controversial, and I was talking about this on television and got a bit of a funny look from one of the presenters. But actually, if your child has experienced some adversity, there is a lot of research to show that it shows them, and if they learn the lessons and they learn the tools, the kind of coping mechanisms that we teach that aren't self-harming and suicide, which is the teenage rate is soaring right now, but you can empower your clients or your employees to then work we can to help their kids to have healthy coping mechanisms, to also be the role model for them that actually shows them that, yeah, sometimes the wheels fall off, but you can get through this. And that having some understanding, age appropriate, of how to manage a difficult parent who might be toxic. And remember, abuse is never abusive to just one person. That's not true. Whatever the family courts might tell you, that is not true. It's just not true. Abusers are abusive to everyone. But as I said earlier, abuse is not always nasty and aggressive. It can be super charming because they're manipulating you. So again, lots of different sides to this. I could talk about it for a long time. Are there any other questions before we go? Thank you. I know some of you direct messaged me and are going to get in touch with me. My email is sara@saradavison.com. Please feel free to email me directly. Really happy to take your questions. Really happy to jump on a quick Zoom with some of you if you're interested to find out how we can support you, how it works, the sort of work we do. And again, if any of this has been upsetting, if any of you are survivors, Marina, could you just drop in the link again? Or you can go to my website, saradavison.com. We have online support groups. We will have one tonight. It's either 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. Just have to check on the website. But our coaches will be there. You can talk to them. There's no cost. Want to help, want to support, come on and check it out if you do need support. If you know anyone that is going, those groups are great. But if you want to provide it through your company, then obviously this is a chance for your company to provide extra support and to help your staff. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're all super busy. We will send the recording out. Do share it with other colleagues. Do share it if you'd like me to come on and do a webinar to your team. I do that too. And let's start shining a light, raising awareness and empowering people dealing with life's challenges to cope better so they can go on and be productive in the workplace, but happy and healthy too. So thank you so much for your time, and please do reach out. I very much look forward to hearing from you. Take care, guys. Thank you.